Hollywood.
Table of contents, Hollywood.
All about Hollywood. With visiting and touring information, geography, history, attractions, and other points of interest.
Dr. Sydney Soclof. drsydney22@gmail.com. 2023. Narration by Dr. Sydney Soclof,
Zoe Phonemes,
and Nathan Koltove. For a complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to tiny.1/ytnavigator. Then from each playlist, select the video from the resulting drop-down list, as in this example. These lists are also scrollable.
From Broadway to Hollywood.
To view this video, select number 1 from the Hollywood playlist.
Ever since the advent of talking motion pictures in 1927, there has been a migration of Broadway talent to Hollywood, and the development of the movie musicals. Hollywood has served as the production center of the U.S. motion picture industry for many years.
The motion picture industry actually started in the Broadway area of New York City in the early 1900s. It was only later on that it migrated way out west to a small place called Hollywood, next to the then little town of Los Angeles.
Why did the movie industry move to Hollywood? The answer has to do primarily with geography.
In the first decade of the 20th century, New York City and Chicago had a growing number of Nickelodeons. The word Nickelodeon comes from the admission price of 5 cents, or a nickel plus melodeon, which is a music hall.
By 1905, there were thousands of these Nickelodeons, all over the country, displaying 1 or 2 reel films that lasted from a few minutes to almost half an hour.
In 1893, Edison had built the first movie studio in the United States at his West Orange, New Jersey laboratory.
The Edison films were made in the Black Maria, a tar paper shack studio. The roof of the Black Maria lifted up so that sunlight could come into the black interior.
And the whole building revolved on a track so it could follow the sun. Electric lights were available, but none were yet powerful enough to adequately expose film. So the best source of illumination for motion picture production was natural sunlight.
One of the earliest feature motion pictures, The Great Train Robbery, was produced in 1903. It is credited as being the first movie to tell a story.
To view this video, select number 2 from the Hollywood playlist.
The short dramas and comedies came from a large number of production companies, mostly in the New York City area and adjacent New Jersey, but in Chicago as well.
A major early filmmaking center was Fort Lee, New Jersey, across the Hudson River from Manhattan.
The first Hollywood, Fort Lee, New Jersey. To view this video, select number 3 from the Hollywood playlist.
In 1908, Thomas Edison was concerned that these production companies were making use of his movie inventions, but not paying him royalties.
He decided to put a stop to this.
He wanted to establish a monopoly to control everything: the production, distribution, exhibition, and pricing of movies.
And so, Edison united the 10 biggest operations as the Motion Picture Patents Company, known as the Trust, a monopoly that would control distribution, exhibition, pricing, and everything else.
The General Film Company was incorporated in 1910 to distribute films produced by licensees of the Motion Picture Patents Company.
Independent distributors and exhibitors formed their own organization to fight back. Many of these migrated west to the Los Angeles area because it was as far as you could get from New York.
In addition, the Los Angeles area was perfect for filmmaking. A great majority of the early movies had been shot indoors to satisfy lighting and temperature requirements.
Southern California had the advantages of non-stop sunshine and a mild climate which allow for shooting movies outside all year round. Also, there was a wide variety of settings including mountains, deserts, beaches, small villages and urban areas.
There are very few suitable areas in the country that would have satisfied these requirements. There's more to the story about Hollywood and Los Angeles and California. We saw how the Big Apple, New York City, became the nation's largest city, the center of finance, fashion, and the Broadway theater, and indeed a world capital with the UN headquarters. How did Hollywood and Los Angeles become the second largest city and the epicenter of the motion picture and TV production?
It's not just the push of getting away from Edison. It's also the pull of the great climate of Hollywood and the Los Angeles region. The fundamental answer has to do with geography, geology, and earthquakes. Yes, earthquakes. It is earthquakes and the movement of the Earth's crust over eons of years that thrust up the mountains of California. These mountains provided a barrier to the hot air from the deserts from getting to the coastal regions, which were cooled by the cold waters of the Alaska Current in the Pacific Ocean.
The waters of the Pacific Ocean along the California coast are cold all year round due to the cold current coming down from Alaska.
In the interior are the very hot deserts of the Southwest such as the Mojave.
As a result, the coastal regions are some 20 to 30 degrees cooler than the interior valleys, just a few miles distant.
The Los Angeles region has a moderate climate because it's exposed to the cold waters of the Pacific and is shielded from the hot desert winds by the mountains. Nowhere else along the coast is there a coastal flatland that is of such a large area.
Most of the coastal regions between the mountains and the ocean are either very narrow or non-existent. The big exception to this is the Los Angeles Basin, which stretches some 50 miles inland.
The Los Angeles Basin thus provides lots of room for a huge megapolis, and is large enough to accommodate the nation's second most populous metropolitan area after New York City.
So, it's the collision of the two plates of the Earth's crust along the San Andreas Fault that caused the building up of the mountains in California eons ago, and thus gave Hollywood and Los Angeles its great climate.
So, it's the moderate climate and enough space to grow that gives rise to the phenomenon of Hollywood and Los Angeles.
Here are Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford in 1921. The expansion of railroads out west to California was a major factor in the increase in the population of the state. The Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869 from Omaha to Sacramento.
Then the Southern Pacific Railroad was built from Sacramento to the then small town of Los Angeles in 1876.
Later, the Atchison, Topeka and Santa Fe or AT&SF Railroad provided another link from the east to Los Angeles that was completed in 1887. The railroad connections from the east to Southern California made it easy to transfer film production to this area.
Hollywood is not an independent city. Rather, it is a district within the city of Los Angeles, whose name is synonymous with the American motion picture industry.
Where is Hollywood?
Here is Los Angeles in Southern California. San Diego is about 120 miles south of Los Angeles, and San Francisco is about 400 miles north.
These are the Los Angeles and Orange County areas.
These are some of the areas of interest.
Here are some of the particular points of interest for visitors.
The Hollywood district of Los Angeles is about 5 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles. To the north of Hollywood are the Santa Monica Mountains, and beyond that is the San Fernando Valley. Just to the west of Hollywood is Beverly Hills.
Famous streets in Hollywood are Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood Boulevard, and Vine.
Now, let's go further back in history.
Spain had laid claim to the entire Pacific coast.
In 1821, Mexico gained its independence from Spain. This is a map of the Mexican Empire. Note that it included the entire present-day southwestern portion of the U.S.
For the next 25 years, Alta California, or Upper California, remained a remote northern province of Mexico.
The annexation of Texas by the United States created a border dispute that caused the Mexican-American War. This war resulted in a Mexican defeat.
This is Campo de Cahuenga in North Hollywood near the Cahuenga Pass, an adobe farmhouse on Rancho Verdugo where the Treaty of Cahuenga was signed between Lieutenant Colonel John C. Fremont and General Andres Pico in 1847, ending hostilities in California between Mexico and the United States.
Following the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848 that ended the war, the region was divided between Mexico and the United States. Alta California was to become the U.S. state of California.
Arizona, Nevada, Colorado and Utah became U.S. territories, while the lower region of California, Baja California, remained in the possession of Mexico.
The Mexican Cession is the historical name for the region of the present-day southwestern United States that was ceded to the U.S. by Mexico in 1848 under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, following the Mexican-American War.
The cession of this territory from Mexico was a condition for the end of the war, as United States troops occupied Mexico City and Mexico risked being completely annexed by the U.S.
The United States paid $15 million, $400 million in today's money, for the land, which was the same it had offered for the land prior to the war. Under great duress, Mexico accepted the offer.
A few years later, the Gadsden Purchase of 1853 added some territory. So altogether the region acquired from Mexico included all of the present-day states of California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, Colorado west of the boundary of the former Republic of Texas, New Mexico west of the Rio Grande, and a small part of Wyoming.
The seat of government for California under Mexican rule was located at Monterey from 1777 until 1835, when Mexican authorities abandoned California, leaving their missions and military forts behind. The capital has been located in Sacramento since 1854.
Then gold.
Gold was discovered near Sutter's Mill on the banks of the American River, near Sacramento in January 1848.
The resulting California gold rush produced a huge increase in the population.
The beginnings of Hollywood.
Horace Wilcox was a strict prohibitionist from Kansas. He wanted to establish a community way out west where no drinking would be allowed.
He also wanted a community based on his very strict religious principles.
Horace Wilcox asked his wife Deida for a suggestion for a name for his new sober religious community.
His wife, Deida, suggested the name Hollywood, after the home of a friend in Chicago.
So, Horace Wilcox followed his wife's suggestion and named the area Hollywood.
The Hollywood sign originally said Hollywoodland. After being damaged in a storm, the land part of the sign was never restored.
This is Hollywood in 1885.
The water supply in the area was inadequate to meet the needs of the growing community.
In 1910, because of the inadequate water supply, Hollywood residents voted to consolidate with Los Angeles. The aqueduct was completed in 1913.
In 1908, one of the first storytelling movies, The Count of Monte Cristo, was completed in Hollywood after its filming had begun in Chicago. A later version was filmed in 1934.
This is the intersection of Hollywood Boulevard and Highland Boulevard in 1907.
In 1904, the upstanding and sober citizens of Hollywood voted to become a prohibition town. The owners of Blondeau's Tavern had a problem.
Blondeau's Tavern was forced to close for several years.
Then in 1911, the tavern was rented at $40 a month to the Nestor Film Company of Bayonne, New Jersey.
So, in 1911, the Blondeau Tavern on Sunset Boulevard in Gower became Hollywood's first studio.
And soon about 20 companies were producing films in the area.
In 1913, Cecil B. DeMille, Jesse Lasky, and Samuel Goldwyn produced The Squaw Man in a Barn, 1 block from present-day Hollywood Boulevard and Vine Street. This was the first feature movie made in Hollywood, and more box office successes soon followed.
We will next have a short clip from the movie, The Squaw Man.
To view this video, select number 4 from the Hollywood playlist.
Hollywood had become the center of the United States motion picture industry by 1915, as more independent filmmakers relocated there from the East Coast.
In the early days of the silent films, most movies in the U.S. had come from productions companies in Europe, principally England, France, and Italy.
In fact, the oldest large-scale film studio in the world is the Babelsberg Film Studio in Potsdam outside Berlin, producing films since 1912. Today it remains as Europe's largest film studio.
The European film industry was devastated by World War I. So by the end of the war in 1918, 90% of the worldwide film production was now centered in Hollywood.
These are the studios in Hollywood in 1922.
From the silent screen through the advent of the talking picture, such men as D.W. Griffith, Samuel Goldwyn, Adolph Zukor, William Fox, Louis B. Mayer, Darrell F. Zanuck, and Harry Cohn served as overlords of the great film studios.
These great film studios included 20th Century Fox, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Paramount Pictures,
Warner Brothers and Columbia Pictures.
Ever since the advent of talking motion pictures in 1927, there has been a migration of Broadway talent to Hollywood, and the development of the movie musicals.
Hollywood has been the production center of the U.S. motion picture industry for many years.
Among the writers who were fascinated with Hollywood in its golden age were the novelists F. Scott Fitzgerald, Aldous Huxley, Evelyn Waugh, and Nathaniel West.
After World War II, film studios began to move outside Hollywood, and location filming around the world emptied many of the famous lots and soundstages, or turned them over to television show producers.
With the advent of television, Hollywood began to alter its functions. By the early 1960s, it had become the source of much of American network television entertainment.
Like the Broadway musicals. The musical film or movie is a film in which several songs sung by the characters are interwoven into the narrative. The songs are usually used to advance the plot or develop the film's characters.
Musical comedies include a strong element of humor, as well as the usual music. dancing and storyline.
The musical film was a natural development of the stage musical. Typically, the biggest difference between film and stage musicals is the use of lavish background scenery, which would be impractical in a theater.
Musical films characteristically contain elements reminiscent of theater. Performers often treat their song and dance numbers as if there is a live audience watching.
In a sense, the viewer becomes the audience, as the performer looks directly into the camera and performs to it.
The musical is associated with a transition from silent film to sound film. The concept of talking pictures had been considered a risky investment by the major Hollywood studios, until the Warner Brothers studio took the leap and produced The Jazz Singer in 1927. Starring Al Jolson.
Jolson singing in The Jazz Singer forever changed the medium of film, and it jolted Hollywood into the era of sound. As Hollywood adapted to sound films, musicals became an important part of Hollywood's movie output, along with westerns, dramas, and comedies.
We will now view a short clip of the title sequence of The Jazz Singer.
To view this video, select number 24 from the Hollywood playlist.
We will now view a short excerpt from The Jazz Singer, which shows the first instance of synchronized speech in motion picture history.
To view this video, select number 5 from the Hollywood playlist.
Two systems for producing talking movies were developed. The first was sound on disc. That was the system used by Vodafone and The Jazz Singer.
The sound on disc system used a phonograph record mechanically coupled to the film projector.
A later and more successful system was sound on film. That newer system obtained exact synchronization of the sound with the picture using a soundtrack printed on the side of the film.
The sound on film system could be of two types, in which either the density, or the area, is proportional to the sound amplitude.
The 1930s, 40s and 50s are often considered the golden age of the movie musical, when its popularity was at its height. During the 1930s, director Busby Berkeley began to enhance the traditional dance number with ideas drawn from the drill precision he had experienced as a soldier during the First World War.
Busby Berkeley was a Hollywood movie director and musical choreographer. He devised elaborate musical production numbers that often involved complex geometric patterns.
We will next have an excerpt from the movie Gold Diggers of 1933.
To view this video, select number 6 from the Hollywood playlist.
In films such as 42nd Street, 1933, Berkeley choreographed a number of films in his unique style.
Berkeley's use of the female body as an erotic spectacle is regarded by many feminists today as exploitation.
Berkeley's numbers typically began on a stage, but gradually transcended the limitations of theatrical space. His ingenious routines, involving human bodies forming patterns like a kaleidoscope, could never fit onto a real stage.
Musical stars such as Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers were among the most popular and highly respected personalities in Hollywood during the classical era.
The pairing of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers was particularly successful, and resulted in several classic films, such as Top Hat, Swing Time, and Carefree.
We will now see two excerpts from the 1933 movie, Top Hat.
To view this video, select number 7 from the Hollywood playlist.
And now, the very romantic song, Cheek to Cheek.
To view this video, select number 8 from the Hollywood playlist.
Many dramatic actors gladly participated in musicals as a way to break away from their typical typecasting. For instance, The multi-talented James Cagney had originally risen to fame as a stage singer and dancer. But his repeated casting in tough guy roles and gangster movies gave him few chances to display these talents.
James Cagney's Oscar-winning role in Yankee Doodle Dandy allowed him to sing and dance, and he considered it to be one of his finest moments.
We will now see an excerpt from the movie Yankee Doodle Boy.
To view this video, select number 9 from the Hollywood playlist.
During the late 1940s and into the 1950s, a production unit at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer headed by Arthur Freed made the transition from old-fashioned musicals, whose formula had become repetitive, to something new.
Recruiting his own workers, mostly from Broadway and the New York stage, Freed brought such talents as director Vincente Minnelli to the world of film.
Starting in 1944 with Meet Me in St. Louis, the Freed unit worked independently to produce some of the most popular and well-known musicals.
We will now see an excerpt from the 1944 movie, Meet Me in St. Louis.
To view this video, select number 10 from the Hollywood playlist. 10 Meet Me in St. Louis _WMVV9. WMV closing bracket.
Products of this unit include The Bandwagon in 1953,
An American in Paris in 1951, Easter Parade in 1948,
and On the Town in 1949. Here are some songs from Easter Parade.
To view this video, select number 11 from the Hollywood playlist. This is also from the movie Easter Parade. The song, A Couple of Swells, with Fred Astaire and Judy Garland. To view this video, select number 12 from the Hollywood playlist. This is also from the movie Easter Parade. The song, A Couple of Swells, with Fred Astaire and Judy Garland. To view this video, select number 11 from the Hollywood playlist.
Easter Parade, 1948.
Singing in the Rain, 1952.
Here is Gene Kelly with his famous performance of I'm Singing in the Rain.
To view this video, select number 13 from the Hollywood playlist.
This era allowed the greatest talents in movie musical history to flourish, including Judy Garland, Gene Kelly,
Gene Powell, Howard Keel,
and Kathryn Grayson and Sid Charisse. Fred Astaire was also coaxed out of retirement for Easter Parade, and made a permanent comeback.
Musicals of the Golden Age.
Here is a chart of the number of musical movies per decade. The first movie musicals came out in 1927 with the beginning of talking motion pictures, so that accounts for the small number for that decade.
We see that the decades of the 30s, 40s, and 50s were indeed the golden age of the movie musicals, many of which came from Broadway shows.
The competition with television, which first became a factor in the late 1950s and became widespread in the 1960s, may be responsible for the drastic decrease in the number of movie musicals in those decades.
The numbers for the 2010s reflect only the first 4 years of that decade.
Note the increase in the number of animated musicals, starting with the first Disney feature-length film in the late 1930s.
Here is another graph of the number of movie musicals. This is the number of movie musicals per year in the period 1940 to 1980. We again see the sharp decline in the number of movie musicals starting in the late 1940s and continuing into the 1950s.
This is a link to a list of all of the musical movies listed by year. Some of these include links to more detailed information about the movie.
This, for example, is the list of movie musicals produced in the decade of the 1920s. This begins with the advent of the talking motion pictures late in that decade in 1927. Here is a partial list of the notable movie musicals of the 1930s, mostly from Broadway shows. Here is a partial list of the notable movie musicals of the 1940s. Most of these are from Broadway shows. An exception is the 1945 movie State Fair, the only Rodgers and Hammerstein musical written directly for film. Here is a partial list of the notable movie musicals of the 1950s. Most of these are from Broadway shows.
Here is a partial list of the notable movie musicals of the 1960s. Most of these are from Broadway shows. The 1950s were both the brightest and the saddest years for the Hollywood musical. The musicals reached their peak, with 2 musicals winning the Academy Award for Best Picture.
However, in this same decade, television drew customers away from movie theaters. In the mid-1940s, 90 million Americans went to the movies each week. By the late 1950s, the figure had dwindled to 16 million.
There were several factors that led to the mid to late 40s and the decade of the 50s being the golden age of the Hollywood movie musicals.
The development of synchronized sound for motion pictures, starting with The Jazz Singer in 1927, was a vital factor for the later growth of the movie musical in latter decades.
After the initial dark days, at the beginning of World War II and Pearl Harbor, subsequent Allied victories in 1943 through the end of the war in 1945 led to a brightening of the mood of the American people, and a more optimistic outlook. The time was now right for upbeat Hollywood musicals.
The post-war prosperity of the 1950s was also conducive to the type of entertainment represented by the musicals, both on Broadway and in Hollywood.
Technicolor is the trademark for a series of color film processes pioneered by the Technicolor Corporation. It was the most widely used color motion picture process in Hollywood from 1922 to 1952.
The use of color in movies, which became increasingly more widespread in the 1940s, was also conducive to movie musicals.
The Toll of the Sea debuted in 1922 as the first general-release film to use Technicolor, and the first color movie that did not require a special projector.
Most of the Golden Age movie musicals were based on Broadway musicals, often from the 30s and 40s. Thus, it was the musicals of the Golden Age of Broadway that was instrumental in the later Golden Age of the movie musicals.
The end of the Golden Age of the movie musicals can be attributed to several factors.
One very major factor was the decrease in movie attendance, due to the great increase in television viewing in the 1950s as more people got TV sets.
One of the most popular TV shows in the 1950s was The Milton Berle Show.
To view this video, select number 14 from the Hollywood playlist.
The production costs of both musicals on Broadway, as well as in Hollywood, escalated greatly in the era after the 1950s.
We note again the profound influence of television on movie attendance in the 10 years or so, from the mid-1940s to the late 1950s.
The 1960s ushered in a decade of great social change and turbulence. The movie musicals of the 1950s suddenly seemed out of style and not in tune with the times.
Another factor was the change in musical styles. With the advent of rock and roll, as exemplified by the Beatles and by Elvis Presley,
musicals of the period from 1944 to 1950 include Anchors Aweigh, Cover Girl, Easter Parade, The Gang's All Here, Good News, The Harvey Girls, Holiday in the Jolson Story. Meet me in St. Louis State Fair. Take me out to the ball game. Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Also, An American in Paris. Annie, Get Your Gun. Athena. Be My Love. Brigadoon. By the Light of the Silvery Moon. Calamity Jane. Carousel. Daddy Long Legs. Damn Yankees. Funny Face.
And Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. G.G. Guys and Dolls. Hans Christian Andersen. High Society. Hit the Deck. It's Always Fair Weather. Kismet. Kiss Me Kate.
Lay Girls. Let's Dance. Lil Abner. Lovely to Look At. Meet Me in St. Louis. Mary Andrew. Oklahoma. On Moonlight Bay.
Peter Pan. Rosemary. Royal Wedding. 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. Showboat. Silk Stockings. Singing in the Rain. Some Like It Hot. South Pacific.
T for Two. The Bandwagon. The Court Jester. The Desert Song. The Glass Slipper. The King and I. There's No Business Like Show Business. 3 Sailors and a Girl. Walking My Baby Back Home. And White Christmas.
State Fair in 1945 was first a movie musical, and not from a Broadway production. It starred Jean Crane and Dana Andrews.
The success of the song White Christmas, originally from the 1942 movie Holiday Inn, led eventually to a movie based on the song.
The movie White Christmas was released in 1954 and became the leading box office draw of the year.
To view this video, select number 15 from the Hollywood playlist. To view this video, select number 16 from the Hollywood playlist.
Annie, Get Your Gun.
Annie, Get Your Gun is a stage musical loosely based on the life of sharpshooter Annie Oakley.
The idea of doing a musical based on the life of sharpshooter Annie Oakley originated with Dorothy Fields in the mid-1940s, who never considered anyone but her friend Ethel Merman for the lead.
By this time Herbert and Dorothy Fields had co-authored 4 musicals for Ethel Merman, the most recent being Something for the Boys in 1943.
The producers of the show were to be Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein,
who had previously produced 2 hit musicals of their own, Oklahoma and Carousel.
Dorothy and Herbert Fields were to co-author the book. Dorothy Fields was to write the lyrics, and Oscar Hammerstein's longtime partner Jerome Kern was to write the music.
Jerome Kern suddenly died in November of 1945, and that changed everything. Rodgers, Hammerstein and the Fields turned towards finding just the right team or person to take on the important job of writing the musical score.
They all felt that there was only one person absolutely right for the job.
But could Irving Berlin be persuaded to write a score for the musical then called Annie Oakley?
Berlin had not written for Broadway since Louisiana Purchase in 1940. And had just finished a 3-year stint with his review This Is the Army.
The revolution that Rodgers and Hammerstein had started with Oklahoma had changed the way musicals were presented. Berlin wasn't sure he could write the music and lyrics in that new style.
Rodgers and Hammerstein suggested Berlin borrow the script and look at it over the weekend.
The following Monday morning Berlin returned with 3 completed songs: You Can't Get a Man with a Gun, Doing What Comes Naturally, and There's No Business Like Show Business.
The show, under the new name of Annie, Get Your Gun, opened at the Imperial Theater in New York City on May 16, 1946. It was a smash success and the critics cheered.
Annie, Get Your Gun ran on Broadway for an astounding 1,147 performances. Here are hit songs from Annie Get Your Gun.
Select the number on the Annie Get Your Gun playlist to view the title sequence number 1 or any of the songs. Select the number on the Annie Get Your Gun playlist to view the song
Oklahoma.
Two other Broadway hits that became successful Hollywood musicals of the 1950s are Oklahoma, in 1955, and Carousel in 1956.
Oklahoma, a musical by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein II, began a new era of sophistication in musical comedy, and was the first of several very successful Rodgers and Hammerstein shows. Oh What a Beautiful Morning, Oklahoma, and People Will Say We're in Love are songs from Oklahoma.
It is said that Oklahoma marks a revolution in musical drama.
Oklahoma introduced a number of new storytelling techniques, including focusing on emotional empathy, dealing with characters and situations far removed from the audience by time and geography, dealing with American historical and social materials, and its use of dance to convey plot and character rather than mere diversion for the audience. Here are hit songs from Annie Get Your Gun. Note that the following scene, as well as many others in this movie musical, benefits greatly in not having the limitations of a theater stage.
Select the number on the Oklahoma playlist to view the title sequence number 1 or any of the songs. Select the number on the Oklahoma playlist to listen to any of the songs.
The Jolson Story.
The Jolson Story, released in 1946, was a very successful film biography of Al Jolson. We will next have a video clip from the movie The Jolson Story, released in 1946.
To view this video, select number 18 from the Hollywood playlist.
We will next have another video clip from the movie The Jolson Story, released in 1946, with the song April Showers.
To view this video, select number 19 from the Hollywood playlist.
The anniversary song is from the 1946 movie The Jolson Story. The picture wins 2 Oscars for Best Score and Best Song. The anniversary song.
To view this video, select number 20 from the Hollywood playlist.
South Pacific is a musical play by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein, which opened on Broadway in 1949. The musical is based on short stories by James Michener, entitled Tales of the South Pacific.
South Pacific was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Drama in 1950.
The original cast included Mary Martin, who created the role of the heroine, Nellie Forbush, and opera star Ezio Pinza, who played the part of Emile Debec, the French farm owner.
The King and I is a musical by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein, with a script based on the book Anna and the King of Siam by Margaret Landon.
The plot is from the story of Anna Leonowens, who became governess to the children of King Mongkut of Siam in the early 1860s.
Meet Me in St. Louis is a 1944 romantic musical from Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. It tells the story of 4 sisters living in St. Louis at the time of the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, World's Fair in 1904.
The stars included Judy Garland, Margaret O'Brien, Leon Ames, June Lockhart, and Marjorie Main.
Meet Me in St. Louis was nominated for Academy Awards for Best Cinematography, Color, Best Music, Scoring of a Musical Picture, Best Music, Song, The Trolley Song, and Best Writing and Screenplay.
To view this video, select number 21 from the Hollywood playlist.
Showboat.
Movie versions of the Broadway musical Showboat were released in 1936 and 1951. It has music by Jerome Kern and book and lyrics by Oscar Hammerstein.
Showboat is based on a 1926 book of the same name by Edna Ferber. It is generally considered to be the first American musical, as a dramatic form with popular music, separate both from operetta and from the Follies-type musical comedies that preceded it.
Showboat opened at the Ziegfeld Theater in New York in 1927, where it ran for a year and a half. We will now see a video clip of the Showboat title sequence.
To view this video, select number 1 from the Showboat playlist.
We will now see a preview or trailer of Showboat.
We will now see another video clip of Showboat, with the song, Why Do I Love You? We will now see another video clip of Showboat, with the song, Can't Help Lovin' It Man of Mine. We will now see another video clip of Showboat, with the song, Old Man River. We will now see another video clip of Showboat, with the song, After the Ball Is Over. Seven Brides for Seven Brothers came out in 1954.
Kiss Me Kate is a stage musical with book by Samuel and Bella Spewak and music and lyrics by Cole Porter. It was first performed in New York in 1948 and ran for 1,077 performances.
Kiss Me Kate is roughly based on Shakespeare's play The Taming of the Shrew, where the main characters are actors in a stage production of that play.
Kiss Me Kate was made into a film musical in 1953 by MGM, starring Howard Keel, Katherine Grayson, Ann Miller, and Keenan Wynn.
Guys and Dolls is a 1950 musical. After a long run on Broadway with 1,200 performances, it was filmed in 1955 starring Marlon Brando, Frank Sinatra and Gene Simmons.
The words and music were written by Frank Lesser, and the book was by Joe Swearling and Abe Burrows.
Guys and Dolls is based upon a short story by Damon Runyon, the idol of Miss Sarah Brown.
We will now view an excerpt from Guys and Dolls, with the number, Sit Down, You're Rocking a Boat. Most of the musical films of the 50s and 60s, as for example, Oklahoma and The Sound of Music, were straightforward adaptations or restagings of successful Broadway productions.
Since the 1950s, however, the musical has declined in popularity. One reason was the change in culture associated with rock and roll.
The trend in modern filmmaking after the 1960s has been to avoid musicals as such, in favor of using music by popular rock or pop bands as background music in the hope of selling a soundtrack album to fans.
There are exceptions to this rule, however, and films about actors, dancers or singers have been made as successful modern-style musicals, with the music as an intrinsic part of the storyline. The other exception to the rule is the children's animated movie, which almost always include traditional musical numbers, some of which, such as Beauty and the Beast, have later become live stage productions.
In summary, what made Broadway in Hollywood?
Going way back in time, it was glaciers of the Ice Age that carved out the Mohawk and Hudson River valleys in New York Bay,
and the earthquakes that thrust up the mountains along the coast of California.
And it was the wondrous developments of technology such as the railroads, movie cameras and projectors, electric power and lighting.
And then it was the immigrants from Europe.
The Irish suffering from the potato famine in Ireland.
Italians escaping the poverty of southern Italy.
And Jews fleeing the pogroms and persecution in Russia and Eastern Europe.
Together with many other emigrant groups. This is the SS Batavia, with 2,584 immigrants to Ellis Island in 1903. A record for the greatest number of passengers to arrive at New York on one ship.
Discussion topic: musicals have generally fallen out of fashion. Why is this the case?
Discussion topic: what other things have fallen out of fashion, and why?
Whatever happened to movie musicals, westerns, movie cartoons, ballads, hats, vests, ties, etc.?
Discussion topic: Jewish immigrants in their first generation were major factors in Hollywood, especially in the early days in the Golden Era. What facts can be attributed to the prominence?
100 years of set locations, with 2,000 films mapped. Box Office Quant, a website about film and statistics, has plotted the filming locations of the top 2,000 films from the year 1910 to 2010 on a Google map.
Verisimilitude is the semblance of reality in dramatic or non-dramatic fiction. The concept implies that either the action represented must be acceptable or convincing according to the audience's own experience or knowledge.
Or, as in the presentation of science fiction or tales of the supernatural, the audience must be enticed into willingly suspending disbelief and accepting improbable actions as true within the framework of the narrative.
The dictionary definition of verisimilitude: 1. The appearance or semblance of truth. Likelihood. Probability. The play lacked verisimilitude. 2. Something, as an assertion, having merely the appearance of truth.
This is a scene from Showboat in the late 1800s. Believable?
Uh-oh. Verisimilitude is broken, and perhaps cannot be recovered.
This is Oklahoma. Just before statehood, early 1900s.
Uh-oh. Verisimilitude is broken, and perhaps cannot be recovered. Another Day of Sun, La La Land opening scene. Your resume has everything except verisimilitude.
Let me know what you think, with questions, suggestions, corrections, and comments. Click to send me an email at any time. I'm always available to answer questions. Recommended videos, Hollywood.
Recommended video, Hollywood History Documentaries, playlist.
Recommended videos, Hollywood, a celebration of the American silent film, playlist.
Recommended video, Hollywood, Episode 1, The Pioneers.
Recommended video, The History of Hollywood.
Recommended video, The History of Sound at the Movies. Recommended video, The History of Sound at the Movies. 30 minutes. 34 seconds.
Table of Contents, Hollywood.
Thanks for watching. Please watch some more of my great videos.